Now, ever since I got that JDM SLX DCXT, I've been itching to get another JDM Shimano, and I narrowed it down between two reels. Now, the first reel and the first choice I wanted to get was the METANIUM Shallow Spool Edition, which is basically the current METANIUM with a, I guess, nicer, brighter silver paint job, the factory Umea shallow spool. But then I realized that pretty much other than those things I just mentioned, it's the same reel as the regular METANIUM. So instead I decided on this reel, the updated Bantam. And the reason I decided on this reel, even though this really doesn't fit my, I guess, style of fishing, which is generally lighter lures, and I definitely tend to favor lighter reels, this reel actually has a lot of significant improvements versus the old reel, and let's get into it. Now, I think this reel came out a few months ago, but I was too busy buying Shimano ALDEBARANs. But here we go, the new Bantam HG, which is the high gear ratio, and I chose the HG ratio for a specific reason, which I'll go over later. But the box itself is different than the previous Bantam, which was all silver. But anyway, let's get into it. Alright. Yep, you do get oil. And yeah, this thing is a chunk. It is heavy. Alright, check that out, guys. Check out the 2022 Bantam. And I think here in America this is called the Bantam A. Let you guys examine it. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to study this reel, compare it to the old reel, and we're going to go over all the new features that this new reel has over the old one. Okay, so I'm going to do this video like this. I'm going to try to kind of separate it out into two sections. The first one being explaining the Bantam to any viewers who are not familiar with this reel and wondering what the big deal about it is. And then in the second portion, I'm just going to go over all the improvements Shimano made to this new reel versus the old one for any current Bantam owners who are wondering whether you should get the new model or just keep your current ones. So let us begin. Now, for those of you who are not familiar, the Bantam is an old name that Shimano resurrected back in 2018 with this reel right here, which is known as the, I guess, 2018 Bantam MGL. Now, this reel just came out of nowhere. I don't think anyone was really expecting it, and it is what I consider to be a mid-price Shimano, costing around $350 here in America, putting it right in between the more expensive METANIUM and just above the slightly cheaper CHRONARCH. And this reel offered something that no other Shimano reel offered before it, and that was the core solid frame. And the core solid frame is basically Shimano reducing the amount of pieces it takes to put the reel together. So in an average bait caster, you have, I think, about 5 pieces that you have to screw together, but with the Bantam it's only 3. So you got your main frame, but then the palm side plate is integrated right into the frame, as you can see. And then the nose piece is also integrated into the frame. And then you got your handle side plate. And then you have this little cap that you turn to access the spool if you need to. But this is metal as well, so this entire reel is all aluminum. And this reel is, I think, a very popular cult reel in the fact that a lot of the hardcore bass guys love this reel. I'm talking guys with the expensive bass boats with all the electronics and expensive motors, and they have multiple combos on their deck. And it is really popular in Japan as a swim bait reel. And that's because due to the all aluminum core solid frame, as well as Shimano's gearing technology like the micro module gears and the X ship, the Bantam has the power of a round reel put into a very, very small, compact, low profile bait caster. And to show you guys how small this reel is, I'm going to compare it with the current 22 ALDEBARAN BFS. You can see the ALDEBARAN, which is an ultra lightweight, small bait finesse reel, looks to be actually bigger than the Bantam. So the reel is just so small and compact and comfortable to palm, yet it's bomb proof and glassy smooth. So as you can see, the first improvement Shimano made in the new model is to the line guide. Now the size and shape of the line guide is the same as the old model. Hopefully you guys can see that it is a cone shaped tapered level wind where it's bigger in the back and it narrows to the front. So that didn't change. Here's the new reel. But the improvement is that Shimano pushed the line guide out farther by a few millimeters, and you can really see. Now if I hold the old reel like this, you can definitely see that line guide right there. And on the side view, you can kind of see the front of the line guide right there, hopefully. But on this new model, if I hold it in the same position, you can't see it anymore. And then when I do the side view, you can definitely see the front of that line guide sticking out farther. Now, just how much farther did they push the line guide forward? Shimano didn't say, but I'm going to do a little test here with a Q-tip. Alright, so what I'm going to do is going to make the line guide go like that. Then I'm going to mark off. Going to make the Q-tip touch the very edge of the line guide. It's a lot harder than it looks to do this. Then I'm going to mark it, and of course you mark it to the top of the spool, not the front. Okay, so there's the old one. It doesn't look like a lot, but I swear it seems like a lot more than that to me. But yeah, there's the difference. And I think while that's not a whole lot, and you can see they obviously could have pushed it out further, when you combine that with a couple of the other improvements, it should make a pretty noticeable difference. Okay, so the next improvement is going to be to the spool. Now with the new Bantam, Shimano upgraded the spool to the latest MGL, which is the MGL3 designation. Hopefully you guys can see that little writing right there. It says MGL spool 3. And the difference between the new spool versus the old spool is that the new spool is supposed to be 1 millimeter taller, and I don't think you can really see a height difference there. But it's also narrower by a couple of millimeters as well. So it's supposed to be 35 millimeters tall by 19 millimeters across, while the old one I think is 34 by 22 if I'm not mistaken. But because it is narrower and taller, you can see it is a little bit deeper to give it the same line capacity. But just like with the other MGL3 spools, there's really hardly any porting on it. Just a couple of holes in the middle, while the old spool had holes all over the place. Now both spools are still using the O-ring silent tune, which is the O-ring right there. And there's one on the other side. Hopefully you can see. The old spool had that as well. But we're going to go ahead and see if the new spool lost any weight. Alright, so the special spool scales out, and I'm not going to remove the bearings on either of these spools due to that O-ring, but I can't remember how much the old spool weighed because it's been a while since I've actually even touched it. But with the bearing, you're looking at 14.75. Now the new spool, it actually feels heavier picking it up. And let's see what the scale says. Actually, it's not 14.64, so the taller and narrower spool lost about 1/10 of a gram of spool weight. Now when you combine this narrowed spool with the fact that they pushed the line guide out farther, we should see a noticeable improvement in casting, which we're going to find out in a different video. So if you take into account that this bearing looks to be a standard spool bearing, it probably weighs about 1.5 to 1.6 grams. The new spool probably weighs right at about 13 grams, which is right in line with its position being slightly lighter than the CHRONARCH spool, but definitely heavier than the METANIUM spool. So the next improvement is going to be to the braking system, and it's pretty obvious to see what that improvement is, and that is that they've added 2 additional brake arms. And just in case you were wondering, the new Bantam shipped with 4 brake arms on and 2 off. And yeah, now the brake arms seem to be the same size, but the fact that they even lost a little bit of weight on the spool despite adding 2 extra brake arms is pretty amazing. Now if you're wondering what the significance of adding 2 extra brake arms is, it really helps in low speed presentations like pitching when you're using extremely heavy line, like 15-pound fluorocarbon and up. And I'll go more into that in a separate video. But going to SBS Infinity 6 versus 4 is definitely an improvement. So the last improvement we're going to go over is going to be the mysterious new tech called Infinity Drive. Now, reading about Infinity Drive on Shimano Japan's website, the best explanation that I could understand from it is that Infinity Drive is the spool shaft is being directly supported by the pinion instead of the bearing. And I'm going to go ahead and put up the illustration of what Shimano's talking about on the screen for you. And when I first saw that picture, I thought to myself, isn't that pretty much how all the reels are, where the spool shaft goes through the pinion? But I guess we have to look at the base of the spools in order to see a difference. If you take a look at the base of the old spool and compare it to the base of the new spool, hopefully you can see that the base of the spool shaft and the new spool is a little bit bigger. old, new. And also I inspected the openings of the pinion gears, and here it is for the old reel. And I don't know if you guys can tell, but the opening where the spool shaft slides through on the new reel is a little bit smaller, but I don't think that's what Infinity Drive is. I think Infinity Drive is this thicker base of the spool shaft is pretty much perfectly fitting in the opening of the pinion gear. So instead of the spool shaft being supported by only the bearings, and of course the spool bearing sits in this little housing right here, it's going to be directly connected or directly supported by the pinion itself. And I guess the result of this is supposed to be that with this new Bantam, it's going to be easier to turn the crank when pulling high resistance lures. So basically smoother, more power, and more winding comfort, which is exactly why I chose the same 7.1 HG ratio in this new model. And that's the best way to test out this new Infinity Drive feature to see if it's legit or not. And basically, long story short, I think Infinity Drive allows this new reel to crank like it has the power of a lower gear ratio. But of course, there's only one way to find out, and that's when we eventually get out on the water. So real quick, let's just go over some less significant changes to the new reel. Obviously, the paint scheme is a big change that really doesn't affect performance, but I will say that while I understand that they had to give the updated reel a new color to differentiate it from the older reel, I wish they would have kept the shiny gloss paint job, because the new reel has that satin matte finish. While it doesn't feel bad, I do prefer the look and feel of a shiny gloss finish. Now the new reel, I think, gained one extra bearing over the old reel, and I'm not sure where they put it, but strangely enough, the new reel lost just a little bit of weight over the old reel, as it's lighter by like 1/10 of an ounce. Now I think that weight savings probably came from them removing this portion right here that was still there on the old reel. As you can see, that's probably worth at least 1/10 of an ounce. Now you can see that the brake cover has retained its, I guess, raw shiny finish, and it's darker than the rest of the reel. They made a slight change in the color of the thumb bar. Actually, the thumb bar is a little bit different. There's more material on the new thumb bar versus the old one. Just now noticed that. And here's a somewhat negative change, and it's probably helping to contribute to the weight loss. But if you can see this silver piece here that's surrounding the gearbox, I'm pretty sure this is plastic. Could be wrong, but feels like plastic to me. And yeah, now while on the old reel, that was definitely metal. And yeah, that's kind of a downgrade in my opinion. But the new reel, it did keep the CI4 Plus drag star. This is not metal. And spool tension, still no big surprise, does not click. But the handle length is the same, just a little bit different color. Knobs are the same. And I think there is no difference between the Japanese market Bantam versus the American market Bantam 8. So there we go, guys, the new updated 2022 Bantam. As you can see, Shimano did make some significant improvements over the old reel that should hopefully show up when casting and retrieving this reel. Now we have a massive cold front coming in, so The temperatures are going to be only in the mid-20s for the next few days, so I'm definitely not going to be out there trying to film an on-the-water casting video. But as soon as it warms up to an acceptable level, I'm going to string both of these reels up and we're going to see if those improvements made a tangible difference that I could feel and see. And then we're going to take both of these reels out to the casting field and maybe include that ZILLION 1000, and we're going to have a good old-fashioned $350 baitcaster cast battle. But once again, I'm going to wait until the temperature gets up to at least mid-30s before I do that. Alright guys, thanks a lot.